Sairam, Mr. William Miller, and a warm welcome to the studios of Radio Sai.
Thank you, Sairam.
If you have heard Bhagwan's discourses, he always came out with something new, something fresh about the life of Jesus, a new perspective on his teaching. So even as you celebrated people of all lands, all languages, all regions, celebrating Christmas in a spirit of universal unity, you also got a very universal message, a universal perspective of Bhagwan's teachings. And one thing that I remember, which Bhagwan narrated very often when he was talking about the life of Jesus, is this progression in his life, in his spiritual evolution from being a messenger to being a son of God, and then saying that I and my Father are one. You are someone who has spent so much time dwelling on Bhagwan's messages on Christmas. You brought out that beautiful book, Be Like Jesus, that has a very beautiful compilation of everything that Swami has said, what to do on Christmas and about the life of Jesus and his teachings. So may I ask you, what is your perspective? What are your insights on this message of Bhagwan on the progression of the life of Christ?
Let me just first say that Christmas has always been one of my favorite times here in Prasanthi Nilayam. I first came here in 1982, and in Christmases that I was able to spend over the years, always was so admiring of the fact, like you said, it's a different experience here. And to see people from all faiths come together to celebrate Christmas was always such an inspiration to me. And I always look forward to what new revelation Swami would give about the teachings of Jesus, about the life of Jesus. And one that really stands out from what you were just saying was when Jesus was talking about the three wise men who came to Jesus at the birth, when he was in the manger, in the stable. And this is what Baba had to say. He says, when Jesus was born, 3 Arabian kings came to see him. The first king said to Mary, Mother, you have given birth to a child who loves God.
Yes.
The second said, Mother, you have given birth to a child who will be loved by God.
Yes.
The third king said, Mother Mary, your child is not different from God. Both are one and the same. The first one statement, Baba says, indicated Jesus' role as a messenger of God. The second one statement indicated he would be the Son of God. The third one statement indicated that the child would one day declare, I and my Father are one. And he goes on to say that this is not only the progression of Jesus, but the progression that all of us go through in our spiritual development.
This is the story of every individual on the spiritual path.
All of us go through this. Another time he would say this is like the evolution from experiencing that I am in the light, then the light is in me, and then I am the light.
Wow.
And so with Jesus, early in his life, he spent so much time teaching in the temples. And sometimes they would throw him out and chase him away, but he always stuck to what was the message that he felt he was to deliver about compassion, about mercy, about treating the poor well. And he always looked to see if he could heal people. He was in a ministry. He was really there to serve. And that really is what Swami says is the essence of being the messenger. It's not just preaching words, like a messenger delivering a sermon.
Living that life.
Living what you're talking about.
Living that message.
Yes. And in terms of being a messenger of God, Jesus would say, he says, I do nothing of myself, like by my own authority, but I say exactly what my Father has taught me. I'm doing my Father's work. I'm here.
You just become only a channel.
A channel, exactly. And that when he would preach giving riches to the poor, and he would minister to the poor and teach the Beatitudes to the poor, he was giving us a model of what we need to do in our own life. That if you're a messenger of God like we all are, how do we, for example, go feed the hungry? How do we operate our businesses in a way that is in the sense of being an embodiment of truth and of love and compassion and nonviolence and these kinds of values?
Is this really practical? What do you think? You are someone who's also a business consultant.
Yes.
Who've been advising a lot of business houses about trying to live these teachings in real life. But how easy or difficult it is? I mean, have you seen really people trying to be messengers of God even as they are business leaders?
Absolutely. I'll give you one example. A man named Lars Koland was hired to turn around a company in Europe that was making hearing aids that was failing. And he was raised with the message of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself, Jesus' teachings. He came to the point where he had to realize he had to begin laying off people to have the company survive. Well, laying off people is a very difficult challenge. But what he did, he said, first of all, in my country, people over the age of 50, if they lose their job, they'll never get another job. Very difficult. So the first thing I did was to make sure that anyone over 50 would stay with the company. And that I would actually even encourage those who most easily could get another job, let them go. Now, everyone thought he was crazy because that means he was losing some of his best talent.
Yes.
And yet he said, what guided me was the principle of love your neighbor and do to others as you would have them do to you. What he found was that when the people that were left, the first people who left, all left on friendship terms. He talked to each one of them. They congratulated him on how he was handling it. And then with the ones that left, they were so filled with the Spirit that this man cares for us and cares for us and our families. They rose to the occasion, and with creating a new vision for the company rose from the ashes and became one of the top 2 companies of the world in their industry.
Oh, wow.
This is the example of someone
Even though they were over 50, they would have contributed as if they were 30 or 40 with more enthusiasm.
Exactly. This is how contagious living righteously can be. And this is what being a messenger of God is. It's not just words, it's not just preaching, it's actually living it in your daily actions and doing things that may seem difficult, impossible, but you know by your conscience it's the right thing to do.
Wow.
Now, you go on to where Jesus evolved to be the Son of God. Now, what is the Son of God? You know, the messenger is like the servant to the master. They're not related. The Son of God is related. They're family. The Son of God means you realize that you have the same DNA as God, okay? That in some level you're not different.
You're not different.
You know, and that Jesus would go out and he would say to people who would say, well, teach us to pray. And he would say, pray this way, our Father. Pray as sons of God, because you are sons of God just like I am. We are all in the DNA of God. And he would say, I pray to the Father, but you also pray to the Father, because it is your Father just as much as my Father. We are all children of God, which means, as Baba would say, we have a divine inheritance that is due to us.
Yes.
What is that divine inheritance? It is God's love, it is God's mercy, it is God's peace, it is God's compassion, and that we have to claim that inheritance by imbibing it in ourselves.
Wow. I mean, this is really beautiful. I'm really tempted to ask you
Yes.
if you can again narrate some instance which you have seen in real life where people are living like sons of God. Very beautifully you explain that it starts with you thinking that you're different from God, you are a servant, so you are different from the master. And when you say you are son, you're connected, intrinsically connected with the Father. And Bhagwan used to say, if you say that someone is a son of a father, then you would find some trait of the Father in the son. Maybe his nose will be like that, maybe his walk will be like that,
Yes.
maybe his smile would be like that of the mother or the father. So you have some traits of the parent. But yes, so in some ways your life is divine. It has some divine attributes.
Yes.
But you give a very beautiful example of in the business world of how this is possible. You can be a messenger of God while you do your business. So anything comes to your mind about how to be a son of God? Can we be a son of God in this world where there is so much of restlessness and there is so much of strife, and it's not so easy to really practice the kind of opposition that Jesus got when he tried to be a son of God?
It was true. He got a lot of opposition. And, at one point he was being accused by people of blasphemy because he declared, I'm the Son of God. He actually called himself the Son of Man primarily. But in the last moments when the priest said, are you the Son of God? And he says, you've stated the fact.
Oh, wow.
But, he also said, but it says in your scriptures, you are God's. He says, if your own scripture says you are God's, then why do you blame me for saying I am also Son of God? But I think another aspect of this is not just seeing the Father, in being the Son and the Father, but seeing each other as brothers and sisters. And I think a beautiful example of all of this together is Mother Teresa.
Yes.
Because what stands out for me just in one little story I heard was someone asked her, how can you pick up a man who's in the gutter, who's half dead, dirty, perhaps even naked, diseased? How can you do that with such a smile on your face? And she says, it's easy. I see this person as Jesus in his most distressing disguise.
Oh, wow.
So this is seeing the divinity in each other as well. And I'd like to read something that she says also about going to heaven with all of this. She says, we all long for heaven where God is. But we have it in our power to be in heaven with him at this very moment. But being happy with him now means loving as he loves, helping as he helps, giving as he gives, serving as he serves, rescuing as he rescues, being with him 24 hours, touching him in his distressing disguise.
Beautiful.
That's a perfect example that if we see each other as Jesus.
Yes. And then you don't judge. As Mother Teresa also
Yes.
very beautifully said that, if you begin to judge people, you will have no time to love them.
Yes, exactly. So I would say that's one of the things that we see is to how do we see each other as brothers and sisters in God? Then we naturally have that relationship with God, which is what God wants, which is treat all of my children.
Yes.
Don't just focus on me. Look at your brothers and sisters.
In fact, I remember that anecdote from, again, Mother Teresa's life when she's picking up this person from the gutter and someone says, I will not do it for $1 million. Oh my God, how do you do it? And she says, even I would not do it for $1 million.
Right.
I do it because it is Jesus.
Yes, exactly. And the same thing can happen in the way we deal with a customer.
Yes.
If a customer calls and is very angry, for example, because some service was not been given to them properly or some quality was poor, how do we treat them as this is Jesus calling?
Oh, wow.
How do I handle my job if I'm trying to sell something to someone? How do I not just try to see what I can get from that person, but how can I truly be of service to them by what we offer? I know in our business we say, if we discover that we cannot be the best provider, we will try to find a company, a better provider than us.
Oh, wow.
If we're not the best that can serve them, we'll try to help them find someone who's better to serve them, to serve their needs. That is our duty. Our duty is to serve that person to get the best that they can get. And so these are the simple ways that we can actually take this into our daily life in terms of claiming that inheritance, which is when we develop the love and compassion and truthfulness and transparency in ourselves, we are claiming the inheritance of being God.
Wow. I remember Rabindranath Tagore very beautifully said, if you want to do good, you knock at the door. But if you love, you find the gates open.
Yes. Good. I love it.
I think
I love that.
That is something profound because, again, it cannot be perhaps explained by logic because, it doesn't make business sense if you go and tell your client that, what you want, we don't have it, so we'll ask someone else to do it for you. It flies on the face of good marketing and good business development. But I think if you're coming from a space of love, there is something that will work, which perhaps is beyond business logic.
Actually, I would say that doing what we do is actually the true business logic. Because what happens? You build trust.
Yes.
What is the essence of good marketing? Building trust.
Trust.
What is the essence of good business? Building trust with your employees, with your customers, and so on. That's where loyalty comes from.
Yes.
And so anything you can do to build yourself as trustworthy and demonstrate your trustworthiness is good business.
It's good business.
Absolutely.
There could be a short-term fall, but that is what will hold you in good stead.
Exactly. And we all know how many companies go out of business in the short-term fall. So,
Yes.
But the thing is, this is what sustains business for the long term.
Wow.
This is what builds a long-term business. So
Fantastic.
now let's look at the third. When Jesus declared, I and my Father are one. And he said further, he says, I am in my Father, and my Father is in me. We are one.
Yes.
But he even went even further, and this is what we have to pay attention to. Jesus said, when you follow my teachings, you will come to know for yourself that I'm in the Father, and you are in me, and I am in you.
Wow.
So in other words, there's not a distinction between me, you, and Father. We're
Yes.
all together. We're all one. And we can discover that for ourselves. Now, you know, this is where, you know, when he was teaching you were, even your own scriptures in the Old Testament to the Jews, you know, you were God's. This
Yes.
starts to reflect a bit of that teaching. I remember a friend of mine in the USA. She talked about what it meant to live this way herself. She says, like, I would volunteer at a home for the elderly. And sometimes those are difficult situations. You know, people are sick, they're maybe not in the right mind and so on. She says, but as long as I held it, this is God serving God. This is God serving God. Then that work became easy.
Work became easy.
You know, and my wife and I, we had an interesting evolution in our understanding of marriage. Mm-hmm. Before we got married, we realized that most of the marriage ceremonies in the world that we know start with the premise of the two shall become one. And we said, okay, well, that's the normal way of thinking about it. But in a sense, what Swami and Jesus is teaching is that it's just the opposite. That there's a oneness that precedes our individuality. Yes. There's a oneness in God that precedes. So marriage is really an experience of oneness having expressed itself as two. Not two becoming one. The one is the starting point, and we happen to be a male and female. Expressions of that oneness. It's a whole different premise for marriage.
It's the whole process only becoming one with Him.
Yeah. See, in other words, it's like Swami says, it's not that we are humans striving to become divine.
Yes.
He says it's actually the opposite. We are divine beings having a human experience. Yes. So we don't have to strive to become divine. We are already divine. But we have to bring our consciousness to that experience.
Yes.
Of that truth. And so as a marriage, when we operate that, we are oneness expressing as two people in this marriage.
And you start with that premise that we are one.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's a much stronger foundation for our differences, so that one time, if we have differences of opinions, sometimes we can step back and laugh and says, oh, oneness is really expressing us too, given our different opinions on this. And yet it holds that difference in a bigger container.
And this works so beautifully in every environment.
Yes.
Anywhere there is a difference, if you first begin with the premise that we are actually one. In an office, there could be 15 people working.
Yes.
And you begin with the notion that we are one. Then you start working towards how to reach there.
Exactly.
Instead of thinking, oh, we are 15 people, we have different ideas and it's not going to work out. It's going to be a very difficult, because the premise itself is that we are different.
Right. There's another experience, just personal to share. My wife and I have done work with the United Nations Habitat on bringing human values into the mega water and sanitation projects in developing countries, and developing a program for developing stronger human values for that. And we would go into different countries, and we'd be coached that, okay, in your audience for the next of 30 people, already 2 people have accepted their bribes.
Oh.
You know, there's corruption here. You know, now how do we hold that if we're going to speak about human values? One of the things is to realize that if we're all divine, then even those people have divinity, the spark of divinity in them. They may have become not even believing in their own potential. They may have started becoming more individualistic and feel like I have to just look out for myself and things like this. But all of that is just the smoke that covers the truth. Yes. And so we had to be able to speak to the truth of who people are, whether or not they themselves could see it.
Yes.
And when you can see everyone as divine when you're speaking, even if some of them are corrupt, it changes your heart and it changes your whole approach to the situation.
And it changes the whole situation too.
Yeah.
When you approach the situation in a new light, the situation itself changes into a new light.
Yeah. It's like we experience stories where people who were not diligent in their quality when others held them in a light of, we trust you to do good quality, they would often rise to the occasion.
Yes.
Now this may sound naive,
Yes.
and you have to be diligent, you have to be vigilant. At the same time, it works.
It works.
You know, people will rise when you believe in them.
Yes.
Often it's you believe in them more than they believe in themselves, and they're having to go through a process of learning to trust life again.
Yes.
And that is where your compassion comes. This is where, in a sense, again, we've earned that inheritance of the consciousness of God. And so, you know, there's another story I just want to share in politics. There's a man who, during the 50s and 60s, lived in one of the countries behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. And his country was Czechoslovakia. And when they had their springtime rising in the late 60s, it got squashed by the military from Russia and things like this. And he was eventually put into prison. And when he was put into prison, he was for 10 years for being an agitator. And he looked out his prison wall and he saw a tree, and it spawned a whole thought process, an awareness, a realization, an insight. And what he said was that he realized that everything in life shared the same beingness. Beingness. You know, that we're all part of one being.
One being.
And that what was happening, the people had lost touch with that, had lost faith with that, and in a sense had gotten more self-aggrandizing, greedy and things like this, self-interested, and they lost faith.
Yes.
And that his job was to help reestablish that sense of the spiritual resurgence.
Yes.
When he got out of prison, there was the fall of the Iron Curtain. He was elected as the first president of Czechoslovakia.
Oh.
And then when the Czech and the Slovakia Republic split, he became the first president of the Czech Republic. Very revered. And he said, you know, for us politically in the world, if we're going to reestablish or establish a sense of unity, it has to come from a spiritual revolution. And that revolution is around knowing the being of God and knowing that being of God in all of us.
Wow.
And that again comes from the way we can live what Jesus lived and what he declared is, I and the Father are one. And I'm in the Father and you're in me and I'm in you, and we are all this oneness. And as we establish that, then we've completed that sense of that journey of consciousness from I'm in the light is in me, I am the light.
Wow, amazing. In fact, I'm just reminded also of how Bhagwan used to mention about Hanuman and say when Rama asked Hanuman once what he thinks about his relationship with Rama, he says that, you know, at the level of the body, I am your servant, but at the level of the mind, then I am just that part of you which is love. But at the level of the Atma, I am not different from you.
Right.
And you know, when he says that you have Rama embracing Hanuman, so that is, again, when you think about it, very beautifully you said this is the journey of every spiritual aspirant, and you can actually draw a parallel to the Bhakti Marga, Karma Marga and the Jnana Marga. See, when you are the messenger of the Lord, you are trying to live his message. It's something like following the path of the Karma Marga. And then when you're at the Bhakti Marga, you know, you are so much in love with God that you almost, you know, you can feel that connect with the Lord. It's in the Bhakti Marga, the stage of devotion. And then finally the realization comes, you know, when you're deep in devotion, finally you reach the stage of Jnana Marga, where you know that you are not different. You're not praying to somebody outside of you. Everything is only inside. That light, that star of Christmas, the symbol of Christmas, that light is actually in the heaven within. And that is the enlightening that the Lord wants to happen in every Christmas and in fact every moment of our lives, isn't it?
I'd like to add one thing to what you were saying, and that is that when you're in that role of serving, that is how love blossoms.
Yes.
So in since the path of action, that is where the path of devotion arises. And when the path of devotion matures, it matures in a sense of pure divine love. And that is what creates the wisdom.
Yes.
See, the wisdom, the jnana, is not about mental.
No.
It's not about mental understanding.
No.
It only actually happens, the wisdom only happens when you've matured in love.
Absolutely.
So love is the source of the wisdom itself.
Yes.
That is why...
You practice love
Yeah.
You know about love, you practice love, and you become love.
And you become love. And in becoming love, then your wisdom has blossomed. You know?
Absolutely.
And so this is why, Swami has once said, he says, God has no attributes and only one quality. That quality is love.
Wow.
And why the sense of Jesus' teachings, this is, when asked, what is the greatest commandment? He says, love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. A new commandment I give you, love one another. Love is the essence of Jesus' teachings, because that is where the full emergence actually blossoms.
And that is what Bhagwan also shared all 86 years of his life. If there is one word to describe all his teachings, every Christmas discourse or any discourse, it ended with love is God, live in love, the Christ. One of the things that very common in every Christmas discourse, of course, it ends with love. Perhaps you'll never find any Christmas message where Swami has not spoken about love. Ultimately, he will end with love, and he will say that live in God, God is love. But one way Swami said you can practice love is practicing three principles. One is you should forget all the harm that is done to you, which basically means you should love your enemies.
Right.
The second thing is that you should forget all the good that you have done to others. And the third is to see God in everyone, to see love in everyone. Can you dwell on what is your perspective on love your enemies? How easy is it in the business world? Can we really do it?
I've always felt that when Jesus said, love your enemies, it was the most radical thing he ever asked us to do. The most difficult, the most provocative, the most, I don't know, just something you want to even just, I can't do it. I don't know what that means. So I'd like to read a few words of what he actually said and talk about it in light of what Swami also says about what does he mean by love.
Okay.
What is divine love? He says divine love, first of all, has three qualities. It is changeless, means it's unconditional. It doesn't turn on and off like a faucet. It is selfless, it doesn't ask for something back. And it's fearless. It's strong, it's always radiating.
Wow.
Now, Jesus said at one point, he says, I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, by the way, who's the enemy? It's not just someone from another country. It can be the person who just shoved you sitting down in the mandir. In that moment, you think that this is an enemy. Or it could be the person in your family that has a very different opinion about something, and you are battling with them like they're an enemy. So enemies can be at all sorts of levels of consciousness. But he says, and so love your enemies, to pray for those who persecute you, to show that you are the children of your Father who is in heaven, to show you that you know that you have the same DNA as God and everyone else shares that divinity. For he makes the sun rise on the wicked and the good, God does, and makes the rain fall upon the upright and the wrongdoers alike, which is what Jesus is saying, is that God's love is changeless and unconditional.
To love like the sun loves everyone.
Yes.
But can we really do it?
Yes. Well, one of the first things I just want to say is the English language makes it difficult in one way. Because the English language has subject, verb, object. I love my wife. So it's as if I'm loving my wife because of some quality of my wife. Okay? I'm loving because of some quality that's in this object. And yet what God's love is doesn't have an object. God simply is love. And whatever comes in the consciousness of God gets bathed in that love. God's love rains on the just and the unjust. The sun rises on the good and the bad. So God's love doesn't...
You don't love to be loved back.
You don't love to be loved back, and you don't love because of the qualities.
Yes. You love
simply
because...
love, not
you
because.
Are loved. There's no because.
There's no because,
Yes.
And so this is what Jesus was teaching, and this is how, he said, the other thing that Jesus said, he says, treat well those who detest you, pursue you with hatred, be merciful, sympathetic, tender, responsive, and compassionate, even as your Father is all of these. So he was really exhorting, like, this was our calling. This is our vocation, if you will. Now, how did Jesus actually, embody that? Why, what gives him the right to say that? You know?
Yes.
We can look at the end of his life,
Yes.
you know, as is in the body before he rose, and see that how, okay, changeless. Okay, when he's up on the cross, what does he say? God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That forgiveness was an automatic expression of his love. That whether that we're praising him or harming him, he
Yes.
could love.
Yes.
Selfless. When he was in the night before his death, he was in the Garden of Olives, they said. And he was so distressed about what was about to happen, he was even sweating blood. But he eventually said, Father, I don't want to do this, but it's not my will that counts. It's your will. Let it be selfless. Let me not do it because I have an ego desire. I don't want to face the pain. Let me be surrendered. Let me be selfless here. This was another act of love on his part. And the fearless, the fact that he was even willing to die.
Yes.
Because he knew it was coming, and he'd known it for a while. So that was the fearlessness, that he was willing to follow what he needed to do. You know, so that's the prescription. Now, how do we live that? You know, even in our day-to-day, how do we practice love that is changeless? You know,
Fearless.
And fearless.
Selfless.
You know, and selfless. You know, perhaps one of those is that, you know, when we're serving others, are we serving them? Do we serve in the kitchen? Do we serve at our customers at work? Do we serve our children because we want something back? Or do we do it simply because that's an expression of love? You know, we can monitor ourselves and see how well we're growing. You know, if someone then doesn't like what we've done for them and we get angry, oh, okay, then we had a string attached to that. That was not selfless love. So we can watch ourselves. And we can also, by the way, not have the expectation of ourselves that we'll always be perfect. You know, we can love ourselves even with our faults. If we're changeless, you know, it's like this. You know, I love little puppy dogs. I see a little small puppy dog and I go, I melt, you know. I have this expression of love coming from my heart. Now, can I hold that and then turn it over here to a situation that I don't normally like? Can I hold the same heart opening and see what happens there? Where this becomes very important in my marriage. My wife and I decided before we were married that when we are in a conflict, okay, and we might at some level think we're enemies, okay, we realize there is no wisdom because when we're in conflict, the mind and wisdom has shut down. The heart has closed. And the heart is the seat of the Buddhi.
Yes.
So we said, if we're in conflict, it is okay for us to say, time out. Let's put this on the altar. Let's put it at God's feet. Let's wait until we are in a place of open-heartedness where we actually have some wisdom. Then we'll renew the conversation and we'll see what to do. Because why struggle to come up with a solution when there's no wisdom? It's going to be an unwise solution.
Yes.
You know, it'll simply be something that stops the conflict, but won't really be a solution. So let's just pause a day, a week, an hour, until we're both ready to come back with an open heart. We can hold hands, look each other in the eye, and say, now let's continue the conversation. What shall we do here? So that's the way that we have moved back into the sense of let's be in a loving place where it's unconditional, and then look at our differences.
And it works wonderfully in organizations also, isn't it?
It does. It absolutely does. You know, it's part of, for example, at Hewlett-Packard one time, they did a piece of research at Hewlett-Packard Labs. The head at that time was a man named Frank Karuba. And he wanted to study what was the difference between project teams that were not successful, project teams that were successful. This is, you know, worldwide product development for Hewlett-Packard. And then teams that were extraordinarily successful, even beyond their own imagination. Well, the difference between unsuccessful and successful teams, as you might imagine, was differences of talent, creativity, motivation, vision, things like this. But there was no difference on any of those qualities between the successful teams and the extraordinary teams. None of the things about talent or creativity or motivation or vision explained the difference. But there was, he said, two qualities that stood out in the extraordinary teams. The first was that those people truly, deeply cared about the people they would be serving.
Wow.
And he said, now, this is extraordinary. These are geeks who actually understood they had customers, They weren't just technical, technocrats. They actually felt they wanted to put themselves in their other people's shoes with empathy and really create for them something that was good. He said, but the second quality was a quality of truth. Mm-hmm. He said they found in themselves a spirit of truth in which no one had to pretend to be something that they weren't. That they could be authentic. They could say, I don't know, if they didn't know. There was no politics going on that way. He said, so really, it was the qualities of love and caring and truth and authenticity. Those two qualities brought the synergy of good, talented, motivated people, let's say from 70% to 95%. And that's where the extraordinary results came from.
Wow.
So the caring, that sense of love and reaching out, not being self-interested,
Fantastic.
really has a powerful, powerful impact in the business world.
In fact, I remember when Bhagwan was speaking to all the management students, he would give the definition of manager and say M stands for mind of man and A stands for awareness of the Atma. So what it means is the mind of man should always be aware of the Atma, of the same Atma which is there in everyone.
Yes.
And that is when you can truly be a manager. And Bhagwan used to say that, management is all about man management. It's all about how you can, your mind can feel the Atma, which is there in the other person.
When you're talking about the Atma there, it takes me to the value of truth, as I was also just talking about.
Yes.
Because
that is the truth.
Yes. And, Jesus said, if you follow my teachings, you'll come to know the truth. Yes. And the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Now, what truth is he talking about? Is he talking about the truth where you don't tell a lie? Well, his life was bigger than that. Was it the truth like these are the facts? Somewhat, that you're living the truth. But ultimately, truth means that which never changes.
Yes.
And so what he was really coming to say is that you will know the true being of God. That is truth. That is Sathya.
Yes.
He says, and it's that true being of God, and you're knowing the true being of God, that will set you free.
Yes.
And that is really the sense of how we then begin to see all as divine, like you were just talking about, and how we begin to treat each other with the knowledge that, we all share the divine principle. We're all sons and daughters of God. We're all in the DNA together. That's really what comes alive.
On one Christmas discourse, Bhagwan very beautifully said, the cosmos is controlled by the divine.
Yes.
But the divine is governed by truth. And Swami said the truth is governed by noble people.
Yes.
And that is the reason why noble people are divine. So when you start practicing these principles, you actually become noble. And in fact, Swami says, it is these people who govern truth.
Yes.
Truth.
And this is where the whole movement towards transparency in government, transparency in business, transparency in our relationships, that is an expression of this truth.
Yes.
I know that in India, one of the revolutions that's happening is that as the bureaucracies are converted into sophisticated IT systems that can track things, the possibility of corruption goes down exponentially because there's transparency into how things are being handled, where they're getting stalled or not stalled, what is the flow through, what is the customer service, And so this is where there is a movement of bringing more truth alive in the actual physical world. This is not just a spiritual dimension, this is a physical earth dimension.
But technology can only aid. Technology only can do so much.
Right.
Ultimately, as Bhagwan says, the transformation should happen.
Yes, absolutely. There's another expression similar to truth, and that is righteousness. As you were saying, truth and righteousness go together like left foot and right foot.
Yes, yes.
And that dharma, that righteousness, in one way gets captured by the expression found in all religions, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule. It is found in every single religious text just about that I've ever researched together. And one example of how that actually is a practical thing in our life as well. There's a man named Dr. Chattopadhyay. He was the head of our refractories for one of the companies here, ACC Cement, I think at the time. And he had a situation where an employee had left, had been dismissed from the company. That employee went out on his own and started selling a type of product that was the same as what ACC was making. But it was not a good product. But he represented it as if it was ACC. And so a customer came to ACC and says, your product has failed. And they said, what product? We've never sold to you. Yes, you did, through this man. He says, that man doesn't work for us. Well, he sold me saying, so all of a sudden, Dr. Chattopadhyay was faced with, here was a customer who had bought, thinking he was buying from his company, but he was buying bogus from somebody else. So what do? He had no responsibility to that customer. He had never sold anything to them. But he said, sir, I will make it right for you. You bought it based on thinking you were buying from us. We have a reputation with you. We will uphold that reputation.
Oh.
Okay? So he did what he felt was dharmic, what was righteous. What he also did from that is he created a trust in his company. That this company stands by its reputation, and its reputation is based on trust. And that was great business. So this is where, treating other people as you would have them treat you.
Yes.
This is where that becomes extremely good business principle. Extremely good.
Amazing. In fact, I remember how on one occasion when Bhagwan was very tired, and the people who were serving Swami, they said, Swami, you should not go for darshan this evening because you are already so tired. Please do not go out for darshan. And there Swami says, do you think I go out to give darshan? I go out to actually have darshan. I go out to see them.
Yes.
Because they have come from so long, and they have come because I have called them.
Yes.
They have come at my will. And I am going there so that I can share love, so that I can see myself.
Yes. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Jesus said something else that comes from this way of being. He talked to his disciples and he said, do not be agitated. My peace I give to you. The peace I know from my relationship with the Father I give to you. And it's not the peace of this world. It's the peace from your spiritual knowledge.
Wow.
And that sense of peace that comes from following the sense of love. It's when we have that sense of unconditional love, and we're fearless naturally.
Yes.
Because when it's unconditional love, there is no other in a sense.
True.
And there's a sense of peace there. And that is where I want to come back to this theme of trust. There's a man named N.S. Raghavan. He was one of the founders of Infosys many, many decades ago, actually. And over time, he became the head of human resources. And he said one of the core values of Infosys was that of internal trust, that we trusted each other. And that has since been found, by the way, from research as being the most fundamental quality of great places to work. When they do studies of where the employees say this is a great place to come to work, trust is the fundamental foundation. But he said, how do you build trust? Do you look at your employees and say, you have to earn my trust? He says, that's backwards. He says, you start with trusting employees.
Yes.
You start from the basis of I trust you. I have no basis not to trust you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you give me a basis not to trust you, okay. But I'm going to start from the sense of I trust. What happens when you do that is that the employees often rise to the occasion. It's the first time they've been trusted.
Yes. They rise to the occasion.
They rise to the occasion. There was one story I heard recently where, this was in Malaysia or Indonesia. And in that environment, there was a lot of mistrust. And this man started a company. Part of the mistrust would be employees typically in that culture might steal a lot of things from the company, small things. So this man started a food company and says, I'm going to do that differently. I'm going to pay them well so that they don't feel a scarcity. I'm going to treat them well, and I'm going to say, I trust you implicitly. Now, he also put in good metrics, good measures, but he found that the level of stealing became non-existent almost.
Oh, wow.
Now, if someone did steal something, they were immediately let go. There was no tolerance. And yet, there was so little of it, not because of the fear of that, but because people had already risen to, we like this, and this is the peaceful environment we want to work in.
Because intrinsically everyone is good.
Yes, that's the truth.
That's the truth.
You know, that is what something that in the 1950s, McGregor and others who are the business writers talked about, that people are good. And again, Hewlett-Packard founded on a principle that people are good. They simply want to do a good job if you give them the right environment. You know, now we have to be wise about that, but we have to start from the belief that we are all having those values in us. We all have that aspiration in us to be able to express who we really are. We may have lost the trust that that's possible. We may become discouraged in life. We may have drawn a conclusion that it's not possible in life. But that's the healing. That's the healing that Jesus actually came to help do. And that's why he does come to say, love your enemies, as hard as that may seem. All the rest may be easy. You know. And it comes to one other principle, and that is nonviolence. You know, there is so much violence in the world, and yet there's also so much energy for nonviolence. You know,
absolutely.
And that, you know, you look at whether it's Martin Luther King or Gandhi or people like that, and you know, those are the kind of kingpins, we might say, of people who've done that. But there's a man named Ashok Mehta. He used to work as the head of human resources at Times of India. He tells a beautiful story where when he first started to work there, there was this rivalry between the administration and the journalists. You know, they didn't talk to each other well. There was kind of a enmity, you know, not a violence per se, but certainly a real discord between them. And he was part of the administration. But what he did, he says, he went to the floor where the journalists were, and he set up his office there.
Oh.
And they said, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. You're the bad guys. You know, go. He says, there's no bad guys here. You know, you're not bad guys. They're not bad guys. This is where I'd like my office. I'm sorry, sir. You know, you're not welcome here. And he says, tell you what, give me 10 days. Let me be here for 10 days. If at the end of 10 days you don't want me here, I will go. But try me for 10 days. And his notion of Advaita, his notion that we are all one here, spread the way he treated them that day, spread the way, of course, he treated his colleagues also. At the end of 10 days, he says, okay, no one's asked me to stay. I think I should go. Oh, no, don't go. Don't go. You know, you're different. And he was able to bring them together in meetings and bridge that difference, bridge that emotional violence, if you call it that, that happens in the workplace. Bridge that mental violence. It doesn't happen necessarily because of anything physical, but you can feel it. You know, and this is how, again, we are called to be love. To be love is expressed as truth or righteousness or peace or nonviolence. And if we carry that unconditional, selfless, fearless sense of love, if we develop that in ourselves, and we can tell, you know, no one has to tell us if we're in that state. We know ourselves if we're being conditional with our love. We know if we're being selfish. We know if we have fear. But if we're determined to keep growing, previously we talked about these stages of growing from a sense of dualism all the way to oneness. As we grow in that, we will actually be able to harness these human values, harness that sense of love, and find that life is so much easier, not harder. You know what I mean?
Life becomes a celebration.
Yeah.
You celebrate every moment, because in every moment you will see the beautiful, miraculous power of love working.
Exactly. And so I think that's, to me, that's the story of what Jesus is bringing us, is the story of love. His life reflected love, every moment of it. even when he was in the temple and throwing out the money changers and screaming at people. It reminds me of times when Swami has raised his voice and maybe shouted a bit. He's done that so to me a couple of times. And yet you could feel he was not shouting at me.
Yeah.
He was shouting at my bad tendency.
Yes. Yes.
But to me, he was nothing but love.
Yes.
You know,
And that is the reason why even when he shouted, you only loved him more, because you know that it was only another form of his love.
Exactly. And even Jesus, in those moments that people see him as, not criticizing, but, being harsh in his language, you hypocrites, he was talking to his fellow sons and daughters of God.
Yes.
And saying, don't be that way. There was one night, not too long before he was crucified, where he was up on the hill overlooking Jerusalem, and he wept. He says, you had this beautiful chance, and you've wasted it. My time has come to the end. You didn't take the opportunity God, our Father, has given you. And he wept. He wasn't angry with those people. He was compassionate to them. The very people who were going to come after him soon.
Yes.
But he wept because they had turned their backs on the opportunity to awaken to their God nature.
Yes.
And that's how we have to remember
Yes.
those moments when we feel closed-hearted and justified in our mind, that we need to take that time, because there's no wisdom there.
We are just losing one more opportunity. Every second gives us an opportunity.
Right.
And we are missing it.
Exactly.
The whole 86 years of Bhagwan was only doing this. It was only giving us these opportunities to unleash this power within ourselves.
And see, the opportunity is not ended.
Not ended.
That's what it is. It continues on.
It continues.
From Jesus' words, it continues from Baba.
Yes.
And as we take this, our time in this body will come to an end.
Yes.
Birth is fatal.
Yes.
And so if we take this opportunity as much as we have this body
Yes.
to imbibe and really live what we've been taught.
Yes.
And that's the ultimate gift that we give back to God.
Absolutely. What God has given us is His gift, but ultimately what we become is our gift to Him. And that is the best Christmas gift that we can give Him, when we become love that He always wanted us to be and that He always is every point in time.
I can't say that any better.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sairam.